Hello, everyone, and welcome to Founders Ascent, the podcast where we talk about books relating to fitness, entrepreneurship, and self improvement. My name is BJ, and I'm here with Gavin, and we're talking about Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Chris Voss is the former FBI top hostage negotiator, and he is sharing his field tested tips, tricks, and tools for talking just about anyone into doing or not doing just about anything. Kevin, what are your first thoughts about the book?
Yeah, I thought this was a solid book, and to sum up really just the entirety of this book, I think we need to talk about chapter one first. And in chapter one, he does a good job outlining the foundation here of what you need to do as a negotiator to get people to do just about anything you want them to do, right? So he talks about how you need to demonstrate empathy. You need to become an empathetic person. A negotiator does their best to be an active listener and understand where the other person is coming from, because you can't get the other person to make the desired deal that you want to make with them unless you fully understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, and he mentions that one thing a lot of people can get distracted by is just their own intelligence and their own assumptions and biases that they come to the table with. And really, you need to leave this all behind. And each time you come to the table, approach it as a new opportunity for problem solving and cooperation. Because that's really what negotiation is doing. Sure, you want to get the best deal as possible, but you also don't want to take so much weight that no one wants to then deal with you because everyone knows you just suck them dry like some vampire. So you want to come to the table hoping to get everything you want and give them everything they need to make this deal happen. And that's sort of the main idea with the new rules he expresses in chapter one on just you need to be empathetic and pay attention to the other person's wants and needs, and then figure out how you can provide for those and meet your own. And one great technique to do that is by mewing what the other person says. And sort of what mewing means, it's a pretty well known psychology technique, where you just sort of repeat back to them the last one or three words, just whatever's important. And so, and you do that just to keep them keep expressing what they are putting down and sort of just show that you're recognizing what they're saying and get more them to keep on talking and tell you even more about what you want.
He also talks about in chapter two, like his like he talks about like different voices. He says most of the time when he's negotiating with somebody else, he'll often do his late night FM DJ voice, which is basically like a cool, calm, collected like slow
Downward
voice.
inflection, where
Yeah,
you start higher and then you go lower, and that sort of just emphasizes the point every time you talk.
yeah. It's to create this aura of authority and gain the trust of the other person. He says other voices that he'll do like this positive, like playful voice. He says this should be your default voice. It's the voice of like an easygoing, good natured person. Your attitude is generally light and encouraging. So he says stick with that one as much as you can. And then the last voice that he says that you could do is the direct, more assertive voice. And this is the voice that should rarely be used, but you can use it to help with like potential pushback, I guess you could say, or to create potential pushback, right? And you definitely want to use it with caution because again, the goal isn't to be assertive the entire time and get this other person to do exactly what you want them to do by being assertive. You know, sometimes you need to create a little bit of pushback, but that's going to be very, very situational.
Yeah, the sort of goal of the negotiation is not to force your ideas on another person
Yeah.
because honestly, that never works. You never truly win an argument because they always feel resentful towards you at the end of it, even if you've made your point and logically proven that they are completely false and you're completely right. Your goal is to guide them towards the answer that you know is correct and let them think it's their own idea. And you do that not by being assertive, but using the late night
Yeah.
FM DJ voice to make your points and mirror them so that you can just keep on extracting more information, recognizing what they're saying, and slowly get to the point where you have a better understanding of what they want. And then you can take that into account when doing your negotiations and figure out how you can provide what they want at minimal cost to you. And in order to do that, in order to successfully negotiate, there needs to be this sort of understanding and cooperation between you and your counterpart. Counterpart. Notice counterpart, not opponent, not adversary, not enemy. You guys are working together on different sides of the deal to make the deal happen. Because at the end of the day, if you're at that table, that means you want the deal to happen. It's just you want to get the best terms you can. And so another great technique that he mentions in chapter 3 is when you are talking to them and empathizing, you mirror back, you label what they're saying uh, at sort of with the mirroring. You also, we need to show that you understand and you're not just reflecting back what they're saying. You label it in your own words what they're expressing, so that you can show that you do understand and they feel like they've been heard and they feel like that you actually care about what they were hoping to get out of this deal. And because of that, you're able to better cooperate and make this deal happen.
He's essentially showing, as you would expect, a bunch of ways to be as empathetic as humanly possible. And here's another one, right? Labeling, like BJ was just talking about. And this is how labeling here is how you get the other person to know that you're doing your best to understand their situation. He gives I guess I should say how you could label. He talks about how you can say it seems like, it looks like, and it sounds like. So you could say it seems like you've had a very stressful day or something like that. You could say that to the other person because because that shows that you're doing a really good job listening and you're listening to the tone of their voice. Maybe you're looking at their body language. And it seems like they had a stressful day or something like that. And you could label it by saying it seems like dot dot dot, right? And he gives Chris Voss here gives a solid example in the book. In this chapter specifically for labeling, he talks about like somebody walking up to like one of those desk assistants for like the airlines or something like that, and how he had this anecdote of somebody walking up and using labeling because I think in this example, if I remember correctly, somebody, a lot of flights were getting canceled, I think, and the person at the desk was having a pretty stressful day. And I believe the guy walked up and said, "It seems like, or it looks like you're having a very stressful day." And I think the person at the desk liked this, and she eventually ended up giving this dude like a first class seat or something like that.
He wasn't. He was trying to get onto the booked flight, and where previously she may have just said, "Oh, it's booked. Sorry."
Yeah.
He was able to sort of label and understand her, and she then worked harder to make sure that this guy got taken care of because she felt like he was taking care of him just by being understanding. And fundamentally, that's like one of the things that all humans want is just to be heard and understand. And it's generally unbearable to feel like you have no control over your situation. But if we're talking historically, that's like American Revolution. Like it wasn't about taxes necessarily. So a lot of the laws that were passed lowered the taxes on the colonists. They just felt like they had no control and they didn't want to be governed by an island far, far away. So they decided that, hey, we're just going to take control of our situation. And so by letting people know that you understand them and employing this sort of tactical empathy, this will help you understand the reasons why your counterpart will not make the deal and make sure you can avoid those deal breakers. Otherwise, you're just walking blindly into a field of landmines, and any one of them could just destroy what you're working so hard to produce.
Yeah.
And so, the next technique that he really focuses on is unlike this sort of sales technique that is really common, where you just try to get them to say yes continuously and hope you can trick them into saying yes when it really matters. Like, do you like water? And the answer is yes.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
water.
And then, do you like the fresh, refined, clean water that you drink? Yes.
Yes, of course.
Do you want to buy this water purifying product?
No.
Yeah. So building up yeses actually doesn't have the intended effect. And part of that is um, every time they say yes, they feel like they're giving you something, and it feels like you're stealing stuff away from them. And at some point, they just want it to stop and shut it down, and will say no, and they'll say no when it counts. And so instead of building up all those yeses, the nice thing to do is to do the opposite and provoke no's as you're trying to approach it. Because when someone says no in dealing, you might think, oh, that means the deal has gone wrong and it's failed. But really, all it's saying is they aren't comfortable or don't like that particular thing you're proposing, which helps you better understand where they're coming from and what you can do to make the deal happen. And sometimes even yeses aren't commitments to the deal. Some yeses are just yes, I understand that. Continue talking. He labeled three different types of yeses, and I trying to remember the three. There was the counterfeit one where they're just saying yes because it's the easier escape route. There's the confirmation, which is the sort of reflective, yeah, I keep on talking, yeah, I understand what you're saying. But then there's the commitment, and that's the one you need at the end. The yes, you're going to buy, yes, you're going to release the hostage, whatever it is. That final commitment, yes, is what you're driving towards. And getting to asking questions that provoke no's helps you get to that commitment yes by better understanding what they don't want to be involved with this deal.
Probably my favorite example from this chapter is when he brings up the whole do you have time to talk to me right now? Like if somebody just walked up to you and you're at the mall or something like that, and someone said, "Hey, do you have a few minutes to spare to talk?" Like I don't think anybody has ever said yes to that question. So generally, what you want to do is elicit no's as much as you can, and so you want to say, is now a bad time? And a lot of the times, people are going to be like, no, And I honestly see myself being a lot more likely to say no here if somebody asks, is now a bad time to talk, than saying yes. So I really like that example. It kind of got me to think about it in a different light because when I first read like the title of this chapter, I was kind of confused. It's like, why would you want to get the other person to say no? But if you get them to say no a bunch, it essentially mitigates the amount of ways or pathways that you can go down, and it sort of steers them in the direction that you want to go. And so just thinking about really good questions where you know they're going to say no is what you want to do. Another example he brings up is if you're talking to somebody, maybe it's like a business partner or something, and you guys are like working on a project or a deal, you could say to them, have you given up on this deal? Right? And obviously they're going to say no. Okay. Like if they say yes, then you should probably not be working with them or trying to negotiate with them in the first place.
I mean, if they say yes, then that means, oh, great, I don't have to waste any more time on this. Thank you for that direct response rather than ghosting me. Like,
Yeah.
having yes, I've given up on this project and no deal is much better than just wasting all your time.
Yeah, that definitely is a really good question to say. Have you? He brings that no question up a lot.
Yeah.
Like, have you given up on this deal? I bet you 99% of people are going to say no to that.
And it's just something else that's
Yeah.
throwing in difficulties and making them not want to respond to
Yeah,
you.
and it more and really importantly as well, it makes them feel like they're in control, right? If they say no, it makes them feel like they're directing this art, like they're directing this negotiation. When in reality, you're the one that's directing them and steering them in the direction that you want them to go towards by eliciting that no here. Because, like we talked about like 2 seconds ago, everybody in their right mind is going to say no to that question. But when they do say no to that question, they still feel like they're in control, which is the point, right?
Yeah, and then they follow up with explaining and better explaining why they're distracted or not able to respond to you. And that's sort of another great technique is you can use the labeling. You can mislabel and be like, it seems like you're concerned about the price of the deal, and they might, and you might know, oh, they're not concerned about the price. They have all the money in the world. They might be like, no, the price is fine, but, and suddenly you get the information you need, which is the real reason why this deal is having issues. And so using that technique with the labeling, but to mislabel, is a great way to extract a no and extract great information. And so, and the other interesting thing about no's is you don't have negotiations without no's. If everyone said yes to anything, there was no reason to go to negotiation. And so when someone says no, that's the start of the negotiation. That indicates, oh, if you're not okay with that, then that means we need to figure out a workaround that will make you okay with it. And that's where the deals come from. The deals come from the no's. And so the more no's you have, the better deal you have.
So the next time you guys are negotiating with somebody, ask as many questions as you can to where you know for a fact they're going to say no.
Yeah, and there's a great example where he talks about for a fundraiser to asking no questions consistently managed to get a 23% better uh, rate of return on donations than the yes-based one to that they had used previously. And so that's sort of what all of chapter 4 covers, where you beware of yeses and master nos. The next chapter 5, is focused on really showing how the goal that you have, which is rather than arguing, rather than being assertive or forcing them into whatever deal you want, what you want to do is make them think that this deal is their idea. They've been in control of this deal the whole time, and they've come up with this genius solution that makes both of you happy and makes this deal happen. And that's indicated by the words, that's right. That's right, not you're right, not yes, but the words that's right show that what you're saying is what they believe is true. Unlike yes or you're right, that's just showing, oh, this is your idea and it's correct and I agree with you. That's right is saying, oh, this is my idea and you've correctly defined or restated what that idea is. And by using "that's right," he brings up this great example of when he there was a hostage crisis in the Philippines, and he realized that this guy wasn't really particularly interested in hurting people. He just wanted to be heard. He wanted to make it clear that these injustices that he felt uh, had been done to him, he wanted to make sure that everyone knew about them. And so when when Chris Voss in this negotiation got the "that's right," that indicated like that you guys are on the same page. That this deal can actually happen because both of you are agreeing on something.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So essentially, essentially what BJ was talking about. You want to do your best to get that's right, and this is just a way to know that you're headed in the right direction. I mean, and then this could also be at the very end of the deal and a good way of knowing if this deal is actually going to happen and if you guys are 100% on the same page as one another, because people can say yes and mean a bunch of different things. People can also agree with you in a bunch of different ways because that's the easy thing to do. Sometimes a lot of times there's absolutely no friction if you just agree with somebody. Like I say it with air quotes, like agree with somebody and not actually mean it. So if I'm trying to make a deal with BJ and he says you're right, then he probably doesn't. He's probably not on like the same page as I am. He's probably just saying you're right because he doesn't fully agree with me and he doesn't think that we're really gonna come to terms with anything in the end. So try to elicit that's right from the person that you're talking to as best you can. Moving on here to chapter 6.
This, I think, was one of my favorite chapters.
Why was your favorite?
Well, so this one really explains. That's right indicates sort of like the goal. The goal is for them to believe that this is their solution. This shows how. This chapter is called "Bend Their Reality," which I think is a fantastic chapter title.
I think it is kind of funny. In this chapter, probably my main takeaway was how you use numbers. I don't know if you wanted to talk about this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, this is probably my key takeaway when you're when you have deals that involve numbers, which I feel like a lot of negotiations are going to have numbers in them. Negotiating with a car dealer, negotiating salary, what have you. You're going to have numbers in there regardless, right? And so what he talks about is while you're in the middle of the deal and you guys are in the negotiation, you're throwing numbers back and forth. It's a good idea to use numbers that end with zeros, like even numbers essentially. You're going to throw out like thousands, like 50,000, 75,000, numbers like that. And in the very end of the deal, once you start to get around your target price, if you're doing a good job, you'll throw down your anchor, and your anchor is going to be a random number. It could be like $727.50. If you throw out a number like that, it's going to make the other person think that you did a ton of research beforehand and like budgeting, and you essentially have it down to like a science. It'll also make him feel like you're giving them almost everything that you have. Like if you're ending off on like a weird number like that instead of just like $50 or like $50,000 or something like that. So anchor with that weird number because it'll almost like play with their head and think that you're giving them everything that you physically have.
Yeah, and that weird number is just one of the ways that you can sort of just bend them into believing that, oh, this is the right solution. But you would think that negotiations would be just like a mathematical thing where both of you move and eventually you guys hit exactly like the center or something. But really, the prices can change just based off the perception. And so, like, he gives this great example of when you're buying a mug, what do you say that mug's worth? Now, versus when you're selling the mug, what's it worth? And so that sort of shift in your perception of, oh, now now I want to make money versus now I just don't want to lose money can change the value of something really quickly. And so by bending them to agree with you, you can get a better deal for yourself. And another great way to do that, uh, once you understand that these are not logical mathematical things, but a messy emotional uh, negotiation, you can drop the F word. And by that we mean
Oh.
fair. Fair is a great way of provoking your counterpart to thinking that, without actually insulting them, you can convince them that they should change the terms of the deal and convince them, oh, I need to be more considerate towards you. And you haven't even negotiated back. They're negotiating with themselves. They're like, oh, I don't want to be unfair. Let me lower the price. And so dropping fair and fairness is just dropping that casually, not aggressively, stay calm. Always stay calm.
Yes, stay calm, guys.
But it's really just an emotional word that can make that can sort of just change the perception of the deal in the same way that changing from being a buyer to the seller of a mug can change your perception, and that can change the value. The other part is Gavin talks about anchoring, but you can also anchor at the beginning with the ranges, and so I'm not sure which chapter this example is expressed, but it's a great example of anchoring. There was a guy requesting money from a dean for a trip uh, with his university, and he needed like $600 to make the trip happen. And he went to the dean and started talking with her about the idea, and she's like, "That sounds great, but money is tight. We only can do 300." And I believe he replied with that that's very generous, but we need 1,000. Which that's anchoring super high, and that pulled them way out of. Oh, I thought this would be a little 3-digit thing. No, it's 4 digits, 4 figures, and so when by knocking her perception like that and just absolutely changing her view, she offered higher, and then he countered offered at she offered at 500. He counted at 775, and then she was like, "Well, it seems like you're going for a specific number. Why don't you just tell me?" He's like, "Oh, okay, $737.50. We'll make this work." It was like, "Oh, that's very precise." And then 2 days later, he gets an email for 750, more money than he actually needed to make this happen.
Yeah, this dude went into that deal wanting to get, I believe it was 600.
That's what I remembered.
Yeah, he wanted 600, and he ended up getting 750. And remember, he used the anchor at the end there with the 737.50.
He wanted 750, and the dean started at 300. There was no meeting in the middle.
Yeah, he didn't split the difference there.
No, and so using anchoring like that to shift their perception of what's possible, it is a great way um, to make you feel happy. The other way you can do that is with how and what questions. How and what are sort of logistical questions with problem solving. So by asking how and what questions, you're asking them to solve your problems. In a hostage situation, how am I supposed to get $2 million to you? It's like, oh, well, yeah, that's a lot of money for one person to get up. You can't get 2 million from the bank. Like, you walk up to a bank and they won't let you take that much money out all at once. So how can you give me that money when we have to sell our vehicles? How can I get that money to you that fast? And suddenly the 2 million thing becomes less than 10,000. And so using how and what questions is one of the best ways to get them to that's right. That this is my solution that I'm proposing, and you've just rephrased it, and you understand what I was going for. This is my plan. Because you asked me all these how and what questions, and I'm a great problem solver. So I answered those questions. Except you asked me questions that would guide you towards the only solution that you want to see, which is a great deal for you. And so playing, using how and what questions in that way to sort of give them the illusion of control and drive them towards the solution that you wanted anyways, but you couldn't tell them that you wanted it because then there would be opposition.
And it seems like his goal behind these what and how questions is to almost force the other person into being empathetic towards you. That's almost what it seems like at times.
Absolutely.
Because, like, for instance, with the question, how he brings us up this question a lot specifically. He says, how am I supposed to do that? That's a beautiful question because, first off, it's not aggressive in any way, shape, or form. Okay. And second off, it gets the other person thinking. Like, the other person gets themselves in your shoes, and maybe you've done a really good job making it seem like you're really poor and you're trying to negotiate with the car dealer or something like that. You're like, how am I supposed to do that? First off, it's kind of maybe a little weird question, but it'll get them thinking, and they'll be like, you know what? Maybe, maybe that. I mean, that does
Maybe
make
I'm
kind of,
not understanding this properly.
yeah,
Maybe my deal doesn't make any sense.
yeah,
They don't want to seem stupid.
yeah. And of course, what we're getting at here as well is the other person is making the decision here. Okay, you're guiding. You're the walls here. You're kind of guiding them in the direction you want them to go in. Because the most important thing, again, we're going to say this again, is you need to make them feel like they're in the driver's seat. So you need to ask the right questions that get them into thinking X, Y, and Z. Right?
Yeah, another great question to make them feel like they're in control is to say at some point, like when you sat down here, what did you have in mind? Like, what did you want to happen? And doing that will get them to better express what they want, and then also it really just shows like it gives the illusion of deference. Like you're just going to let them have what they want if they just tell them. And so, I mean, we've talked about this one, but have you given up on this deal? Is a great calibrated question.
Yeah, we brought that up earlier on before we got to the what and how, and that's pretty much why we brought it up earlier because it is one of the what and how questions. So doing your best to calibrate what and how questions is really good. He does talk about how you can use like what are the other questions? Why?
Sometimes why,
Yeah.
generally not where, when, because that's just facts that you're going to get from where, when, and why can often be critical. Like, why do you think that? You're so dumb.
Yeah.
Is sort of the implication. When really you just want information. But the whys generally come off as critical. I definitely know that I've seen this, because pretty much any time I ask why, I was always follow it up with, it's just a question, It's like if I'm asking why, like for someone to express their personal beliefs, I might ask them, well, why do you feel that particular way or something, and uh, generally I do sort of feel the need to follow it up with, oh, it's just a question. It's not. I'm not criticizing you. I'm not trying to say you're incorrect or anything. But so definitely why can be seen as aggressive. Well, the what and how, those just feel logistical. That's just like, how am I supposed to accept that? How am I supposed to do that? Uh, all those. Uh, he he talks about this a bit later, but as part of understanding uh, your counterparts, he mentions that when doing a negotiation with one person, they were using a whole ton of like Christian terminology, and so he said that if he had lowballed the offer, he might have said, "How am I supposed to accept that when I'm supposed to be a good steward of my company?" And steward is a word that's often uh, it has a unique sort of Christian definition, is how he explained it, and so. Using what and how questions that interact with um, their personal beliefs is a great way to do that. And um, again, it's just all about not questioning them, giving them the illusion of control, making them feel like they're solving problems with just logistical questions on how are we supposed to get this done? I want to get this done. You want to get this done. How can we do it? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't accept that. That's too high, or whatever. And so, or maybe you don't even ask. You probably don't even say that's too high. But how am I supposed to accept that, or whatever? And make them start thinking about how it's supposed to be done. And you need to remember that even though they might say yes at the end, a lot of deals are going to fall through if you don't have the how worked out on how it's going to happen. And so by approaching some component of those in the discussions, you better make sure that happens. Like there was this kind of funny, kind of sort of tense and crazy situation where prisoners had taken over
Oh yeah.
the it had was holding wardens hostage, and they're chaotic and violent and disorganized. That's not the funny part. The funny part is they figure out, here's how we're going to do it. We're gonna they're going to get two pairs of walkie-talkies. One person walks out carrying the walkie-talkie, and then once they get past the sort of siege line, they'll radio back and say, "Hey, I'm fine. They didn't beat me up. Uh, you can come out," and they would all come out one at a time, nice and peacefully, and everything would be fine. But then one of the SWAT team members sees this guy with a walkie-talkie as he's walking across, and takes it away from him, and keeps on sends the person on its way. And then he holds up the walkie-talkie, super proud, and he's like, "Hey, some idiot gave him a walkie-talkie." And so Chris Voss and everyone else is like, "No, no, no, give it back to him." And so that whole deal could have fallen through just because one person didn't understand how it was supposed to go down. And so you need to make sure that you guarantee execution by gently using calibrated questions like what and how questions to guide them towards a solution that can actually happen. And how is also just a better way to say no. Like, if you know, he gives this, I mean, lead hostage negotiator. So a lot of his examples have to do with hostage situation. And so back to the one where they're demanding millions of dollars, and you're like, how are we supposed to get that much money? You didn't say no, because if you had said no, they would have been like, give us the money or we'll kill them. So instead, you say how, and you've gently said no. They know you mean no, but they're like, it doesn't feel like a no, right? And so using those to sort of gently guide them towards your goal is a great way to get what you want in a negotiation.
And about that, the part where the one of the individuals that had a family member hostage or something like that, they wanted what, 2 million in ransom or something like that.
I think it was 5.
It was an absurdly high number anyway.
Yeah.
And yeah, Chris Voss goes, how am I supposed to do that? Right, forcing empathy upon the other person, and he got them to negotiate with themselves, which is what I really liked.
This was a good thing. He was talking about proof of life, how getting proof of life was a big deal in negotiations. And he was in a hostage negotiation situation, and there was another group of people trying to separate from him that were trying to do negotiations to get the people back. And they had gotten proof of life, and this wasn't a trained person. Uh, they just managed to get proof of life for nothing. And he's like, no way, like that's a big deal. We work super hard to get proof of life. How can you just get it? And so we watched the recordings or researched that sort of situation, and they didn't ask, "Can you give us proof of life?" They asked, how are we supposed to pay that much when we don't even know if they're alive?" It's the how, and suddenly they're like, "Oh, that's a quick, easy way to solve the problem. Here, I'll put them on the phone."
Yeah, and if he started that question off with why, I don't know if it would have ended up the same, right? Like, why should I pay you if I don't know if this person's alive? Like, that sounds kind of mean.
The easy answer to why should I pay you is because we have a gun to his head.
Exactly. And if you say, how can I pay you if I don't know if this person's alive? That's a way better way of framing it.
And it just sounds reasonable.
It sounds way better.
It's reasonable, and it's just like, oh.
And again, it
that's
forces.
That's a perfectly reasonable logistical question about
exactly
how this is supposed to happen.
It forces the other person to be empathetic towards you. And they're like, you know what? I think they're right. Because if you start off that question with why, they're like, you know what? This person's kind of being a jerk, right?
And then, in the same hostage negotiation situation, they managed to use the how and what without even giving any offers to get it down to $16,000, $16,500 from $5 million. And then when they get that and they're like, okay, 16,500, but you have to pay it immediately. They just oh sorry, from 16,500, they ask, how am I supposed to get that money immediately when we have to sell our cars and trucks? And so by asking that sort of question, they were able to buy more time and negotiate it down. And the end result was actually they didn't even have to pay because they had bought so much time that he had managed to escape from the hostage takers, and it worked out fine. And so by not using the word no, but using how, is a great way to guarantee that this will work out. The next chapter really goes into depth about bargaining and how you can get the best price for something. And he talks about the, I believe it's pronounced Ackerman.
Yeah, that Ackerman model.
Yeah, where you set yourself up at 65% of your target, 85% of your target, then 95% of your target, and then 100% of your target. And sort of what you do is you first use your how and what calibrated questions to get them to negotiate with themselves. How am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to make that happen? All this stuff. And then only then, once they've negotiated with themselves and brought them down, you set your offer at 65%. And you continue to use empathy, and you continue to say no in non-no sounding ways. And you do that throughout the negotiation, and then once you go from 65 to 85, so 20% change, then 85 to 95, 10% change, and then 95 to 100, 5% change, and then at the very end, you notice how the size goes from 20 to 10 to 5 and consistently getting smaller steps. You feel like you're at your last bit, and then at the end, you throw in a non-monetary item, like a broken radio, to show that you've given them everything and this is what I have left.
Yeah, that's you saying I'm at my limit here and I have nothing left to give you, pretty much.
And that last number, that 100 number, that's a great time to use what Gavin was talking about, and the precise
Your anchor there.
$39,723.92.
Yes.
That's
$37,893 sounds way better than $38,000.
Yeah.
So.
And so by setting those precise numbers and using these sort of graduated, slower declines, you get it to where they feel like they're getting everything they have, and that's the only solution that will work. But in reality, you've just convinced them into paying exactly what you wanted. The last thing is talks about black swans, which Black Swan is the name of his company that he does all his negotiation training through. But it's also something that people didn't think existed. Everyone thought there was white swans, and then so black swans were used as an expression to show, oh, that can never happen. That's when pigs fly or whatever. But then people discovered black swans existed, and so these are the things that show up at the table for the first time that no theory, no preparation is going to show you, and you have to be ready to identify those. Black swans are sort of like ways, they're basically leverage for you to get what you want. The things that this person sitting across from you, they're the things that they want or need that you can use to help get the deal you want and leverage them into what you need to happen. And those aren't going to come from preparation or relying on your assumptions. Those are you're going to have to discover them, hopefully face to face at the table, because doing it over text or email or even phone is a lot harder with how much information is conveyed non-verbally or paraverbally, which is how it's said. Well, verbally is what's said, and then non-verbally is what's not said, so body language and stuff like that.
Yeah. So with the circling back to the leverage here, the three kinds of leverages that he talks about are positive leverage, and positive leverage is essentially like when you as the negotiator have what the other party wants, you're able to withhold that and essentially play that to your advantage. So if you're like I guess dealing with a car salesman, you have what they want, which is the money in exchange for the car. So you have positive leverage in that regard. You can withhold the money if you choose, and they'll miss out on that if the deal does not go through. The second kind of leverage that he talks about in the book is negative leverage, and this is your ability as a negotiator to make the other party suffer. Now, you're in negotiating with another person, you may not have all these, but your goal is to find out which kinds of leverage you do have and use them to your advantage. So you may not have leverage that will give you the ability to make another person suffer. And this probably has a little more to do with like negotiating with the FBI, but if you do have something like that, then you definitely can use it. The last form of leverage that he talks about is normative leverage. And this is when you analyze the other party's stance and use it to advance your position essentially. And you're going to do this by being as empathetic as possible, asking the right questions, the what and how questions in order to understand what that stance is, and use these forms of leverage to make it to where they almost have to say yes to what you want them to say yes to, right?
Yeah, and he also mentions another triplet of important things where you might think that your counterpart is acting irrationally or not making any sense, but in reality, you should be looking for that as a clue that no, they if they're negotiating, they think they're making sense. It's you who's not understanding where they're coming from, and it might be they're ill-informed, like they don't know something that you do know, and you need to, or they don't believe something that you believe, and so you need to show just factually, hey, this is the case, and something that will change the whole perception. The other one is that they're constrained, like there's something else impacting them where they can't go forward with a deal or make something happen just because there's something out of their control and out of your control that's causing problems. And so maybe they're not the right person to do the deal with, and you need to talk to someone else who isn't constrained at this time. And then the last one is that they might have different interests, and they might not actually be after what you think they're after. You may just think, oh, they want money and the best deal, but maybe that's not at all what they're searching for, and they might be looking for something else that isn't quite apparent. And so you need to be mindful of so what those sort of other impacts on their decision making might be. And you can do that. He mentions a 7-38-55 rule of 7% is the verbal, indicated verbally. 38% is the paraverbal, how it's said, the tone of voice, whether it's assertive or FMD, DJ voice, or whatever. And then 55% is the non-verbal through body language and through just how they react, which is why it's great to get face-to-face contact with them rather than doing it over email or text whenever possible. And so that is sort of what the chapter by chapter, it's a great read and only 10 chapters. So I would definitely take a look and read through everything because there's certainly bits and pieces that we may have missed in our discussion. I think the biggest thing that you need to keep in mind here when you come uh, to do a deal is to not think about it as it's them versus me, but actually try to understand them and try to help guide them to establish this sort of shared, um, almost camaraderie with the other person to make them legitimately care about what you want from this deal and show that you care about what they want from this deal and guide them towards the solution that you feel is best just by using how and why and summarizing to get the that's right and all these other mirroring, labeling, and all these other techniques that all culminate just to get them to believe that this is their solution rather than trying to argue or convince them that they're wrong.
My key takeaways are definitely going to be just employing as many tools and strategies as you can to be an empathetic, active listener. Because he's essentially, in the entirety of this book, giving you a bunch of ways you can be an empathetic listener, right? He's telling you that you can use what and how to elicit empathy on their behalf. He's telling you to say it seems like labeling, right? Labeling what you believe they feel like, and that shows that they are seeing you try to internalize what they are thinking, which is empathy there. And so your goal as a negotiator is to be as empathetic as humanly possible, not to try to plow through these negotiations with force. You don't want to do it with force. You want the other person to think that they are coming to the conclusion that you want them to come to on their own doing, right? And you got to ask those right questions. You got to ask those what and how questions to make sure that they come to that conclusion. And those are probably my biggest takeaways from this book. And I guess we can talk about now what we're going to be reading in our next episode, which is going to be The Alchemist. I've heard a lot of good things about The Alchemist, but I have not yet read this book. BJ has already read this book.
I've read this book 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm...
The Alchemist by Paleo Kaleo. There are a lot of books called The Alchemist. I know there's a fantasy series where the first book is The Alchemist. And I've read that too, and it's pretty good as well.
But not as good as this one.
But this one is a fantastic, quick read. I think the full title might be The Alchemist, a fable about following your dreams. We'll be covering that next week on Tuesday at noon. So if you've stayed this long, thank you so much. Fun little we've in reading this book, both of us were really excited to apply what we've learned from this. And there's a lot of great opportunities at like garage sales and just you will find opportunities to negotiate in your life if you really look for them. But I also, and with Gavin's sort of help and advice, we've put together a game of negotiation, completely untested. We would love your feedback. We're going to include a link to the document in the description, so you can print it out and check it out. And
for free.
For free. Just please let us know how it goes. Hopefully it's helpful in honing your negotiation skills. Hopefully you've learned to never split the difference, and to negotiate as if your life depended on it, and all this other great stuff that this book tells us. Thank you so much for listening. This is Founder's Ascent.
And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Woo. See ya!